The wind did not simply blow across the high plains of Wyoming in the late 1870s. It hunted. It scraped across the land with a sharp predatory hiss, lifting dust and biting into the skin like a warning from the earth itself. Mara walked through it with her head bowed, pushing forward as if fighting a physical hand pressed against her chest. She did not know how many days she had been walking. 3, maybe 4. Time had blurred into a long stretch of cold, pain, and stubborn will. Her boots were ruined, flimsy things meant for swept saloon floors, not jagged frontier trails. The soles had worn so thin, she could feel every rock bruise the tender flesh of her feet. Her left heel had bled yesterday, and the sock was stiff now, stuck to her skin. Still, she walked. She clutched the only belonging she had left, a small bundle of clothes wrapped in a rough shawl that still carried the faint scent of lye soap. Everything else had been stripped away the moment she was thrown out of Silver Creek. The new proprietor of the boarding house had turned her out without hesitation, calling her bad for business, her voice as sharp as the wind that now chased Mara across the plains. Respectable. That was the word the woman used. Mara had tasted it like ashes. Respectable was something she had never been allowed to be. Now the sky above her had turned a heavy shade of purple. Evening was coming on fast, draining the warmth from the world. As she stumbled across a patch of uneven ground, her knee struck the earth hard. A cry rose in her throat, but she swallowed it back. Tears took water she didn't have. She forced herself upward. You cannot stop, she told herself. Not here. Not in this cold. She lifted her eyes and saw it, a thin ribbon of smoke curling into the iron-colored sky. Faint, almost lost in the wind, but real. Smoke meant fire. Fire meant shelter. Shelter meant she might see tomorrow. Hope struck her sharply enough to sting. She gathered what strength her shaking legs had left and pushed toward it. The cabin rose slowly out of the gloom, a low, weather-beaten structure built from thick logs. A small corral stood nearby, and 2 horses huddled with their backs to the wind. The place looked lonely, hard, unforgiving, but it was life. She climbed the single flat stone that served as a step and raised a trembling hand. She hesitated. She knew what she looked like, a woman alone, ragged, desperate. Men in these parts made their own assumptions about women who traveled without protection, but the cold was sinking into her bones. She knocked. The sound was barely audible above the wail of the wind. She waited, her breath shaking out in thin white clouds. She knocked again, harder this time. Please, she whispered. The latch clicked. The door opened slowly, not swinging, but pulled inward with cautious deliberation. A tall man filled the frame. He wore a heavy wool coat and a battered hat pulled low. In one hand, he held a Winchester rifle, cradled close but ready. His face was carved from the harshness of the land itself, lined, weathered, marked by a pale scar running from his temple into the dark stubble of his beard. His eyes were deep-set, guarded, and entirely unreadable. Mara tried to speak, but her voice rasped out as nothing more than air. The heat from inside drifted around her, warm enough to make her dizzy. She swayed. "Help!" she managed. The man's gaze flicked past her, scanning the horizon as if searching for others, men who might be using her as bait. But there was nothing out there, only wind and dust. He looked back at her, his expression shifting by the smallest degree as he took in her torn shoes, her bruised wrists, and the faint blue tint of her lips. A flicker, something like reluctant concern, crossed his face. He stepped back. "Come in before you let all the heat out," he said. His voice sounded like gravel raking across wood. Mara stumbled over the threshold. Her legs gave out, and she pitched forward, catching herself against the doorframe. The man reached out, his touch firm, impersonal, steadying. "Sit," he said, nodding toward a rough-hewn table. She lowered herself onto the bench. Her body trembled from cold and exhaustion. The cabin was small but warm. A stove radiated comforting heat from the corner. A single bed sat against the far wall. Saddles, tack, and tools lined the rest of the space. each object placed with careful intention. The man closed the door and barred it against the rising wind. He walked with a slight hitch, a stiffness in his left leg. Without a word, he dipped a tin cup into a water bucket and set it in front of her. Drink slow. The water was cold and sweet. It hit her stomach like something alive. She coughed, then drank again. He watched her quietly, leaning one shoulder against the counter. His rifle was beside him, close enough to reach. His eyes never stopped studying her, not with hunger or cruelty, but with the wary caution of a man who had lived alone too long and trusted too little. He ladled warm stew into a bowl. Warmth spread through her chest and limbs, driving out the ache of the cold. When the bowl was empty, she finally found her voice. "Thank you," she whispered. The man nodded once. "Where did you come from?" he asked. "Silver Creek," she said. "That is 3 days walking, maybe 4. "You walk all that way alone?" She nodded. "Why?" Mara lowered her gaze. She could not tell him everything. She could not tell him she had been thrown out with nothing. She could not tell him that survival, for her, had always come at a price she no longer wished to pay. I was put out," she said softly. "I had no money for rent." He watched her for a long moment. His jaw tightened. "I'm Eli Turner," he said. "I'm lying, my dear." "Mara." Eli exhaled long and hard. "I live alone. Supplies are thin as it is. Winter's coming. I cannot afford trouble." A knot of dread tightened in her stomach. "I can work," she said quickly. "I can wash, cook, anything." He held up a hand. "You can sleep by the stove tonight. Tomorrow morning, I'll give you some food and point you toward the stage road. You'll catch a wagon if you start early." Her heart dropped. The stage road was 2 days away. She would never make it. She looked at the cabin. The fire, the warmth, the solid walls that kept the wind outside instead of inside her bones. She felt panic claw up her throat. I cannot go back out there," she whispered. Eli's eyes flicked to her face. He heard the fear in her voice, but mistook its meaning. "You'll be fine," he said gruffly. "You got this far." But Mara knew she wouldn't survive another day on the open plains. She looked up at him, desperate for something. Mercy, patience, anything that would keep her inside these 4 walls. And though she didn't say it aloud, the truth cut through her like a blade. This cabin, this man, this moment, they were her last chance at life. Eli Turner did not sleep that night. He sat in the old wooden chair near the stove with his rifle across his lap, watching the fire burn low while the wind rattled the shutters. Mara slept curled just a few feet away, wrapped in a blanket he had tossed her without meeting her eyes. Every so often she shivered in her sleep, her breath uneven, her face tight with whatever memories chased her. Eli kept the fire alive, adding logs when the flames dipped. It surprised him. He had lived alone for nearly 6 years. He owed nothing to anyone. And yet, when he looked at the sleeping woman on his floor, something he had nearly forgotten, something like responsibility, stirred in him. When dawn arrived, pale and cold, Eli stood and stretched his stiff leg. Mara's eyes blinked open. For a moment she looked frightened, as if she had forgotten where she was. Then she saw the fire, the blanket, the safety, and she breathed out slowly. Eli handed her a tin cup of hot tea. She cupped it with both hands, grateful for the warmth. "You should eat," he said. She nodded and took the small plate he offered. Bread, slightly stale but soft near the center. A bit of jerky. Nothing fancy, but she ate like it was a feast. When she finished, Eli did not soften his tone. "You should leave by first light if you want to reach the stage road before nightfall." Her hand froze around the empty cup. She didn't look up. "I can't go back out there," she said quietly. "You made it here," he replied. "You can make it there." She swallowed hard. "I made it here because I had no choice. I didn't stop because stopping meant dying." Her voice shook. "Eli, I won't last another day alone. I know it. And you know it too." He looked away. He hated that she was right. He also hated that helping her meant letting someone into his life. Letting someone into his life meant reopening doors he had nailed shut long ago. But before he could answer, A distant rumble cut across the cold morning air. Not thunder. Hoofbeats. Eli stiffened. Mara went pale. He stepped to the window and lifted the curtain's edge. A single rider approached, moving with purpose. Dust lifted behind him. The stance, the posture, the look of a man who wasn't out for a ride but on a mission. Eli's jaw clenched. "You expecting someone?" he asked. Mara shook her head quickly. Too quickly. He looked at her again, and this time he saw fear. Not the quiet kind she had shown last night, but a deeper fear. The kind that came from knowing exactly who might be coming. "Mara," he said, "who is that man?" She shook her head again, but her hands trembled. The rider slowed near the corral, then dismounted. Even through the dusty window, Eli could see the man's expression. Something dark, determined, and unsettlingly familiar. Men like him came to collect, to punish, to reclaim what they believed was theirs. Mara stood frozen. Eli turned to her. "Is he looking for you?" She closed her eyes. A single tear slipped down her cheek. "Yes," she whispered. "His name is Jonas. He doesn't let go." Eli lifted his rifle, checking the chamber. "You stay behind me," he said. Jonas didn't knock. He slammed his fist against the door with enough force to shake the frame. "Open up!" he shouted. "I know she's in there." Mara backed into the corner, pressing herself against the wall as if trying to make herself disappear. Eli opened the door only halfway, his body blocking the entrance. "What do you want?" he asked. Jonas pushed forward, but Eli didn't move an inch. "That woman belongs to me," Jonas spat. "No," Eli said calmly. "No one belongs to you." Jonas sneered. "She ran off owing me money, a lot of it. I took her in. I fed her. I kept her safe. She thinks she can just leave?" His voice twisted with anger. "She's coming with me." Mara let out a quiet, broken sound. Eli's voice stayed level. "She stays here until she decides otherwise. You're not taking her." Jonas's eyes narrowed. "You're making a mistake, cowboy." Eli didn't blink. "I've made worse." Jonas's hand shifted toward the revolver at his hip. Eli lifted the Winchester a few inches, just enough for Jonas to notice. "You're outgunned," Eli said, "and you're outmatched." Jonas smiled a cold smile. "We'll see about that." He stepped back, mounted his horse, and rode off. Not away, but toward the tree line. Eli watched him go, understanding immediately what the man planned. He wasn't leaving. He was preparing. When Eli shut the door, Mara slid to the floor, shaking. "He's not going to stop," she whispered. "He'll come back tonight. Men like him do their worst in the dark." Eli crouched beside her. "You're safe here," he said. "No," she said, her voice breaking. "You don't know what he's capable of." Eli set his rifle across his knees, his expression hardening into something fierce, something born of old battles and old scars. "You don't know what I'm capable of," he said. Outside, a cold wind swept across the open land, bending the tall grasses as if bowing to the storm that was coming. The sun dipped behind the jagged hills early that evening, swallowed by thick clouds rolling in from the north. The temperature dropped fast. A storm was forming, the kind that made even the strongest horses shiver and drove wolves closer to cabins for shelter. Eli stacked extra wood inside, checked the locks, and laid out ammunition on the table. Mara watched him quietly from the stove where she stirred the pot of beans he had asked her to warm. Her hand still trembled, but there was something steadier in her eyes now, something that came from knowing she was no longer running alone. "Eli," she said softly, "Jonas won't fight fair." "Men like him never do," Eli replied. She swallowed. "If he gets inside, he won't stop." Eli finally looked at her. "He won't get inside." The wind howled around the corners of the cabin. Somewhere out in the dark, a horse whinnied sharply, the sound cutting through the night like a warning. Mara flinched. Eli moved to the window, lifting the curtain with 2 fingers. A shape moved near the barn, then another. Jonas had not come alone. Eli's jaw tightened. "Mara," he said, "blow out the lamp." She did, plunging the cabin into shadow lit only by the glow from the stove. Eli pulled her close to the corner, away from the window. "Stay low," he whispered. The crunch of boots on frost came next. 3 men, maybe 4. They moved with confidence, not fear. Jonas's voice rose among them, rough and triumphant. "She's in there!" "He can't hide her." A fist hit the door, hard. "Open up, Turner." Eli didn't move. The second hit came from the back of a boot. The frame shuddered. Mara pressed her hands to her mouth to stop the sound that rose in her throat. Jonas pounded again. "Eli Turner, you hand her over or we burn this place to the ground." Eli lifted his rifle. "You set one spark near my barn," he said, "and I'll put you in the ground before your match hits the dirt." Jonas laughed, a terrible, confident sound. "You think you can take all of us?" "You're a crippled hermit with a house falling apart. I've got men who owe me, men who'll do whatever I say." There was a pause. Then the smell hit the air. Smoke. Jonas had already lit the barn. Eli's chest tightened. The barn held his winter feed, his tools, his life. But if he stepped outside to save it, Jonas would take Mara. And that, Eli knew now, mattered more. The flames grew, flickering against the night sky through the window. Horses screamed in panic. Mara's breath broke. "Eli," she whispered, "you're animals." "I know." He stood, every muscle in his body tense. "You stay here," he told her. "Do not move until I say." Before she could protest, he kicked open the cabin door and stepped into the freezing night. Jonas and his men stood in the firelight, their faces painted orange and black by the dancing flames. Jonas grinned when he saw Eli. "There he is." Eli raised the rifle. "I warned you." Before Jonas could draw, Eli fired. The bullet struck the dirt inches from Jonas's boot. The men jumped back. "One more shot," Eli said, "and it won't miss." Jonas snarled. "You don't scare me." "You should be," Eli replied. A sharp crack split the air as one of Jonas's men fired first. The bullet tore across Eli's shoulder, spinning him halfway around. "No!" Mara screamed from the doorway before she could stop herself. Eli clenched his jaw, steadying his rifle. The next shot came from him, fast and unhesitating. The man who had fired at him cried out and dropped to a knee. Jonas cursed. "Get him!" 2 men rushed forward. Eli shot once. 1 man fell. Before he could fire again, Jonas tackled him to the ground. The rifle flew from Eli's hands. The 2 rolled across the frozen dirt, fists swinging, boots kicking up dust. Eli tried to rise, but Jonas was stronger, fueled by rage. "I warned you not to get in my way!" Jonas growled. He slammed Eli's head against the ground. Eli's vision blurred. Jonas drew a knife from his belt, raising it high. Inside the cabin, Mara grabbed the first thing she could find. A cast-iron skillet from the stove. Her heart pounded so hard she felt sick, but she ran, bare feet slapping against the cold ground. Jonas never saw her coming. She swung with every ounce of strength she had. The skillet struck Jonas across the skull with a thick, sickening sound. He dropped, knife falling from his hand. Eli sucked in a shaking breath and pushed himself up. Mara stood over Jonas, chest heaving, the skillet trembling in her grip. "You saved my life," Eli said quietly. Mara looked at him, tears running down her face. "You gave me a place to feel safe. I couldn't lose that." Eli forced himself to his feet, grabbed a rope, and tied Jonas's hands before the man could regain full sense. The other men, seeing their leader down, scrambled for their horses and vanished into the night. The barn burned down to its frame, collapsing in a shower of sparks. The flames hissed under falling snow as the storm finally broke overhead. By morning, Jonas was hauled into Silver Creek by Eli and turned over to the sheriff. Witnesses in town, people Jonas had hurt over the years, finally spoke up. A judge declared him guilty on multiple counts and sentenced him to a long time behind a locked door. When Eli walked out of the courthouse, Mara stood waiting in the cold street. Her eyes were full of something he couldn't name at first, but then he felt it. Hope. She stepped toward him. "Where do I go now?" she asked softly. Eli felt the answer settle inside him like a warm ember. "Home," he said. "If you want it, my place has room for two." Her breath caught. She nodded. The storm had passed. The sky above them opened into a pale blue morning. Together they rode back to the cabin on the hill, no longer as a man who lived alone and a woman running from her past, but as two people who had survived something unforgiving and had found each other on the edge of the wilderness. And for the first time in a long time, both believed they might finally belong somewhere.